Korea, 1907. A revival is tearing through the peninsula like wildfire. In the city of Pyongyang, grown men are on their faces, weeping so hard the floor is wet beneath them. Confessions are pouring out of mouths that haven't spoken truth in years. Thousands are flooding into churches night after night. Missionaries who have spent decades in Korea without seeing a single conversion are now watching entire villages come to Christ in a single evening. But in one small village outside the city, a boy named Tae-won is not watching any of it. He is too busy trying to survive. His father drinks. Not occasionally, constantly. The kind of drinking that turns a man into a stranger in his own house, that leaves children learning to read footsteps before they can read words, learning to tell by the way a door opens whether tonight will be quiet or terrible. Tae-won is the oldest of 5. By the time he is 12, he is already the one making sure his younger siblings eat before he does. Already the one standing between his father's rage and his mother's body. He would later write that he did not learn what a father was supposed to be from his own father. He learned it by watching what a father was not. His mother is a different story. Park Yoonja is a small woman with a quiet faith that seems impossible given everything pressing against it. She prays every morning before the house wakes up. She prays at night after the children sleep. She prays in between with a kind of stubborn tenderness, as though God owes her nothing and she is asking anyway. She tells Tae-won, more than once, God sees what this house holds. He has not looked away. Tae-won is not sure he believes her, but he does not say so. In 1908, a missionary couple arrives in the village. Thomas and Helen Barrett. Americans from Illinois, sent by a denomination most people in Korea have never heard of. They set up a small school in a rented room and begin teaching children to read. Tae-won's mother pushes him through the door. He goes reluctantly. He comes back the second day on his own. Thomas Barrett is not what Tae-won expects. He is tall, awkward with the Korean language, makes mistakes that make the children laugh and laughs at himself when they do. But he prays with a directness that startles Tae-won. Not recited, not formal, conversational, almost urgent, as though he is talking to someone who is actually listening. Tae-won has heard prayers before. He has never heard anyone pray like they expected an answer. By 1910, Tae-won is 16 years old and Japan has formally annexed Korea. The annexation does not happen gently. It happens with soldiers, with edicts, with the systematic dismantling of Korean identity. Language suppressed. Names pressured to be changed, the slow erasure of everything that makes a people know who they are. Thomas Barrett is forced to report to the colonial government. The school is monitored. What can be taught narrows by the month. It is in this atmosphere of compression, political, spiritual, personal, that something breaks open in Tae-won. He is at a small prayer meeting in the back room of a church that barely deserves the name. Maybe 20 people. Someone is praying out loud. Someone else begins to weep. Tae-won is not planning anything. He is not even particularly focused, and then it comes. Not like lightning, not like the dramatic wave he has heard described. More like a fist unclenched inside his chest that he didn't know had been clenched his entire life. He puts his face in his hands and stays there for a long time. When he looks up, something is different. He cannot explain it then. He spends the rest of his life trying to explain it and never quite getting there. The closest he comes is this. I had been standing outside a house in the cold, and then I was inside. Have you ever felt that? That sense of having been outside something your whole life, outside peace, outside belonging, outside the thing you were made for. And then suddenly, without earning it, finding yourself inside? Tae-won goes home and tells his mother. She listens without expression. Then she goes to her room. He hears her weeping through the wall, quietly for a long time. Years later, she tells him she had been praying for that moment since he was 3 years old. By 1914, Tae-won has become something no one in his village predicted, a preacher. He is not trained. There is no seminary he can attend. What he has is a worn Bible, a ruthless ability to work, and a way of speaking about God's reality that cuts through performance to something underneath it. People come to hear him not because he is polished, but because he sounds like he means it, because he does. He begins walking village to village. This is not a metaphor. He literally walks, on dirt roads in worn sandals, through weather that makes the journey punishing. He eats when people feed him. He sleeps in churches, in barns, in the back rooms of houses, belonging to people he has just met. He prays for the sick. He sees things that he cannot explain by any natural mechanism and does not try to. He simply reports what happens and lets it be what it is. The churches he plants are small, poor, and often the only stable institution in communities that have everything else stripped away. Under Japanese occupation, the church becomes something more than a spiritual gathering. It becomes the last place where Koreans can speak their own language freely, sing their own songs, remember who they are. Tae-won understands this instinctively. He preaches in Korean loudly, on purpose, with a defiance that is also a kind of tenderness. He meets a woman named Sunja in 1916. No, wait, that name is already taken in the file of names from the channel's previous videos. Her name is Yeon-hui. He meets Yeon-hui in 1916 at a church gathering in a city he is passing through. She is the daughter of a schoolteacher, educated, quieter than him in company, but more clear-eyed. She reads people with an accuracy that sometimes unnerves him. Their first real conversation lasts 4 hours. He proposes 6 weeks later. She says yes, but with conditions. "I am not going to be a woman who waits at home," she tells him. "If you go, I go." He agrees. He does not fully understand what he is agreeing to. They marry in the spring of 1917. Within 2 years, they have a son, Byung-jin, and a daughter, Aran. The children are born into a life permanently in motion. They know their father's voice from prayer before they know it from conversation. They know the road before they know the neighborhood. Yeon-hui holds the family together with a combination of warmth and iron will that Tae-won acknowledges, in his letters, as the actual reason anything works. He writes to her constantly when they are apart. The letters are not romantic in a conventional sense. They are full of what is happening, what God is doing, what he is worried about, what he is praying through. They read like dispatches from a man who considers his wife his closest thinking partner, not just the person holding his household. She writes back with equal directness. Her letters correct him when he is wrong. He saves everyone. In 1919, Korea erupts. The March 1st movement begins with a Declaration of Independence read aloud in a Seoul park, a document signed by 33 representatives, including 16 Christians. It spreads across the country within days. Millions of Koreans take to the streets. The Japanese response is swift and brutal: mass arrests, torture, massacre. At a village called Jimri, Japanese soldiers lock Korean Christians inside a church and set it fire. Tae-won is not there when it happens. He is in the south, preaching. He hears about Jimri 3 days later from a man who is still shaking when he tells it. Tae-won goes silent for a week. Not quiet, silent. He doesn't preach, doesn't pray aloud, just sits with it. Yeon-hui doesn't push him. She brings him food, sits near him, waits. She has learned that certain things in him need to move at their own pace. When he comes back, something has shifted. Not broken, shifted. The preaching becomes harder edged. Less about comfort, more about the nature of a God who does not abandon what he loves even when it is being consumed. The crowds get bigger. The colonial authorities take notice. In 1921, Tae-won is arrested for the first time. The charge is technically about an unlicensed gathering. The real reason is that he has become too visible, too influential, and too Korean in a context where all three things are dangerous. He spends 40 days in a cell. He is interrogated 6 times. He is not physically tortured, but the pressure is sustained and precise, designed to break something in him through accumulation rather than force. What they don't account for is that he has already been through worse. A drunk father, a childhood of managed fear, a decade of walking roads no one walks alone. By the time the Japanese interrogators sit across the table from him, he has already developed a threshold for suffering that surprises everyone, including himself. He comes out of prison thinner, quieter, and somehow more certain than when he went in. He writes in his journal, "They tried to take away my voice. I discovered in that cell that my voice is not mine to give away. They cannot have what I do not own." By the late 1920s, the work has expanded beyond what one man can hold. Tae-won has planted churches in 7 provinces. He has trained more than 80 local evangelists. He has developed a method, informal, nothing written down, for identifying and releasing leaders from within the communities he serves rather than importing them from outside. It is, before the word exists in the form it will later take, indigenous church planting. He is also beginning to travel beyond Korea. China, 1928. He crosses the border into Manchuria, where hundreds of thousands of Korean diaspora live in conditions that are somewhere between exile and slow erasure. He arrives with no contacts, no money, no plan beyond showing up and trusting that what has always happened will happen again. It does. Within 3 months, he has started 4 gatherings. Within a year, one of them has become large enough to build a structure. He writes to Yeon-hui, "I don't know how to explain this. The same thing keeps happening. I arrive with nothing, and somehow that is exactly what is needed, because then it is clearly not me." She writes back, "I know. I also know that your children would like to see their father before Byungjin finishes school. Come home." He comes home. He comes home and discovers that Aran, his daughter, now 12, has developed a cough that does not go away. He notices it the first evening, mentions it to Yeon-hui, who has been watching it for 6 weeks and has already taken Aran to a physician. The physician is cautious. He wants to wait. He wants to monitor. They wait. They monitor. The cough gets worse. By 1930, the word tuberculosis is in the room and nobody wants to say it out loud. Tae-won prays over his daughter every night. He prays the way he has prayed over thousands of strangers in thousands of rooms across Korea and Manchuria. With directness, with expectation, with the same God he has seen answer in ways that baffled physicians. He prays with everything in him. Aran looks at him during these prayers with the trust that only a child has for a father, absolute and uncomplicated. She does not get better. He is in Manchuria again in the spring of 1931 when Yeon-hui's letter reaches him. Aran has taken a significant turn. Come home. He is on a train within hours. He arrives in time, not to see her healed, but to sit beside her bed, to hold her hand, to be there. She dies on a Thursday morning in April, 13 years old, with her father present and her mother on the other side of the bed. There is no theological explanation that helps in the immediate aftermath. Tae-won does not offer one. He buries his daughter and then goes very quiet again, the way he went quiet after Jimri. Except this time the silence lasts longer and goes deeper, and Yeon-hui is frightened in a way she has not been frightened before. People come to the house to offer condolences. Several of them ask, quietly or directly, the question that is hanging in every room. How does a man who has seen God heal thousands of strangers lose his own child? Tae-won sits with this question. He sits with it for months. He does not produce a tidy answer. What he eventually writes, in a letter that circulates among the Christians who know him and eventually reaches a much wider audience, is this: "I do not understand why Aran was not healed. I know what I have seen with my own eyes, and I know what I did not see in that room. What I can tell you is this: the God I prayed to in that room is the same God I prayed to in the rooms where people stood up and walked. My trust is not in outcomes. My trust is in Him. And I will not let grief make a liar out of 40 years of witness, even when the grief is the worst I have ever known." The letter is passed hand to hand across Korea, then Manchuria. Then, eventually, in translation further, he goes back to work. Not immediately, he takes time. Yeon-hui insists on it, and he does not argue. They spend 3 months in the mountains, the two of them and Byungjin, who is now a teenager, and watching his father with the watchful attention of a son trying to figure out who his father is under the public image. What Byungjin sees is a man who prays at a table in an ordinary kitchen, a man who makes bad jokes, a man who occasionally cries and doesn't explain why, a man who is not particularly impressed with himself. This, Byungjin will say decades later, is the thing he did not expect and could not forget. By 1933, Tae-won is back on the road. The work picks up where it left off, except something in the delivery has changed. The preaching is still powerful, arguably more powerful because grief has stripped away the last of anything performative. He is not trying to impress anyone now. He is simply saying what he knows. He begins speaking more directly about suffering, not offering solutions, speaking honestly about the dark, what it feels like, what God does and does not do in it, what faithfulness looks like when healing does not come. The audiences that respond to this are enormous. He did not expect it. He finds that the people who are most desperate to hear this particular message are the ones who have been sitting in churches for years, hearing only the triumphant version and quietly drowning In 1936, the Japanese colonial pressure intensifies. Shrine worship is mandated. Korean Christians are required to bow at Shinto shrines, a directive that tears the church apart because some complies and some don't, and the ones who don't face consequences that range from loss of employment to imprisonment. Tae-won does not comply. He is not loud about it. He doesn't make a speech. He simply doesn't go. When asked directly, he says, "I bow to one. I cannot bow to another." He is arrested again. This time he is held for 4 months. This time the physical conditions are worse. He comes out with a permanent tremor in his left hand that never fully resolves. He also comes out still holding the same position. The 1940s bring war, then occupation, then the liberation of 1945, that should feel like pure triumph but feels more complicated than that. 'Cause liberation comes with partition, and partition carries the seed of what will happen 5 years later when North and South go to war and the peninsula tears itself apart. Tae-won is in the North when the war begins in 1950. He is 62 years old and visiting churches he helped plant decades earlier. The border closes around him like a door slamming shut. He cannot get back. Yeon-hui is in the South with Byung-jin, his wife and their children, Tae-won's grandchildren whom he has not yet held. For 3 years there is no word, not a letter, not a message, not even a rumor. Yeon-hui does not know if her husband is alive. She prays with the same stubborn tenderness she learned from watching her mother-in-law, the woman who prayed for decades before she saw anything happen. Byung-jin does not know what to do with his father's absence. He has spent his whole life managing it in smaller doses, father away for months, then back, then away again. This is different. This has no known end. He is in his mid-30s now, with a family of his own to hold together, and he finds that the faith he inherited is being tested in a way that is real and daily, and does not have a narrative resolution neatly waiting at the end. What he later says is this: "My father was always preaching that the secret was in the being, not the doing. I didn't understand what that meant until I was sitting in a country at war, not knowing if my father was dead, not able to do anything. And I found out that what he was talking about was real, because it was the only thing left." An armistice is declared in July 1953. The border remains where it is, drawn across the middle of the peninsula with a precision that ignores everything human on either side. Word comes eventually, through channels that are not quite official and not quite unofficial, that Tae-won is alive. He is in Pyongyang. He is old and not well, but he is alive and he is still doing what he has always done, which is gathering people in rooms and speaking to them about God. The North Korean government does not like this. He is monitored, restricted, intermittently pressured. He preaches in smaller and smaller groups, in quieter and quieter rooms, until the gatherings are just handfuls of people who come to a house that doesn't advertise itself as anything. He and Yeon-hui never see each other again. She dies in Seoul in 1961 at 71, surrounded by Byung-jin and his family. At her bedside, Byung-jin reads aloud from the letters his father had sent her over the years, the ones she had kept in a box, tied with kitchen string, in the same order she received them. He reads them aloud, and she listens with her eyes closed, and something on her face that is not quite smiling and not quite crying but is somewhere in between. News of her death reaches Tae-won through the same unofficial channels. He receives it and goes quiet in the way his family has learned means something deep is moving through him. He is 73 years old. His hands shake, his eyesight is going. He keeps preaching. In 1965, he is 77 years old. And a young man comes to him. A student, barely 20, frightened and searching in the particular way that frightened and searching manifests in young men who have not yet admitted what they're looking for. His name is Jae-in. He has heard of Tae-won the way young people hear of old men who matter. Second-hand, filtered through admiration that has not yet been tested. He expects someone imposing. What he finds is a small old man who shakes slightly, who makes tea badly, and who listens with an attention so complete it feels almost physical. They talk for 3 hours. At the end, Tae-won says, "You have been trying to become something. Stop. Find out who you already are in him. The rest will follow." Jae-in goes away and comes back. He comes back again. Over the following 2 years, he becomes something like a student, something like a son. He will later say that those 2 years were the formation that everything else in his ministry rested on. In 1967, Tae-won wakes up early, as he always does, prays as he always does, and sits down to write. He is working on something he has been writing for years. Not a formal document, more like a sustained conversation with everything he has seen and learned and lost and found. He writes for about an hour. Then he puts the pen down and does not pick it up again. He dies that afternoon, in the city where the Great Revival began 60 years earlier, in a country that has been through war and division and occupation and loss in ways that would have destroyed lesser things. 79 years old, Jae-in receives the news and weeps openly in a way that surprises the people around him who do not know the story. He cannot explain it adequately to anyone who wasn't in those rooms with the old man and the bad tea and the 3-hour conversations. He tries in a eulogy that is passed from hand to hand and eventually, decades later, reaches South Korea through channels that have become slightly more open. He was not great in the way that word usually means. He had no empire. He had a body of work that exists in the lives of people, and you cannot point to it or measure it or put it in a display case. He lost his daughter, he lost his wife, he lost his country twice. He kept going. Not because he had the answer to why those things happened, but because he had found something that those things could not take away. In South Korea, Byung-jin reads this and puts it down and sits with it for a long time. He has spent years not knowing what to do with his father. The absence, the greatness, the failure, the faith. He grew up in the shadow of a man who was enormous in public, and sometimes a stranger at breakfast. He watched his mother hold everything together while his father walked roads in other provinces. He watched his sister die and his father grieve and pray and keep going. He watched his mother age alone in a divided country. He has his father's Bible now. It was brought south eventually, through the same unofficial channels, by someone who understood what it was. The margins are full of notes in a handwriting that Byung-jin recognizes from childhood, but has not seen in years. He sits and reads the notes for a long time. What he finds in the margins of a life is not a hero, is not a saint in the polished sense, is a man who got up every day and did what he knew to do, who failed in certain rooms and showed up in others, who lost things that should have broken him and was broken and got up anyway, who discovered, and this is what it comes to, in the end, that the power that moved through him was never his to keep or lose. Never something he could manufacture or forfeit, never dependent on his performance or his consistency. It was simply available, to him, to anyone who would stop trying to do something with it and instead learn to live in it. The underground church he helped sustain in North Korea still exists. No one knows exactly how large it is. The South Korean church that grew from seeds he planted, through Jae-in and others, has sent missionaries to 63 countries. His grandchildren, most of them, do not know the full story. They know the outline. A great-grandfather they never met, who preached in rooms and walked roads and prayed over people, who lost a daughter and lost a wife to a border that shouldn't exist, who kept going. Maybe you know the feeling, not his feeling exactly, but the shape of it, doing what you know to do in the direction you know to go, in a world that does not always confirm your choices with results you can see. Trusting something you cannot prove to the satisfaction of the people who want proof. Tae-won never got an official rehabilitation. His name does not appear in the histories that get taught in schools. There is no statue. There is no denomination with his name on it. There is only what happened in the rooms, in the people, in the generations that went out from those rooms into other rooms. That is enough. That has always been enough. What is stopping God from using you? Your age. Tae-won preached to the end of his days, shaking hands, bad eyesight in a country that had made it dangerous. Your losses? He buried his daughter. He lost his wife across a border he could not cross. Your past? He came from a house where fear taught children to read footsteps before they could read words. Comment below with, "Use me, God. My generation is waiting, not as a performance, as a declaration." And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so that the next time we uncover a story like this, you're the first to hear it. Because there are more. There are so many more. What if the next one changes everything for you?